The universe has a speed limit, and you cannot break it. Light travels at exactly 186,282 miles per second. Every single photon of light moves at this exact velocity through the emptiness of space. No matter where you are in the cosmos, and no matter how you are measuring it, this speed never changes. But here is where reality begins to bend your mind. This is not just about light being fast. This is about the deepest and most fundamental law that is written into the very fabric of existence itself. Scientists call it the cosmic speed limit, and it governs everything that moves through space and time. Think about the highways for a moment. You can drive at 60 miles per hour or maybe 80 if nobody is watching. With a faster car, you can go faster. More power is equal to more speed. That kind of logic works perfectly fine here on the Earth. But the laws of physics rip that logic apart when you begin to approach the speed of light. Albert Einstein was the one who discovered this barrier back in 1905. His theory of special relativity revealed something that was truly shocking. The speed of light is not just another speed. It is the maximum velocity at which any information, any particle, or any object that has mass can travel through the universe. Nothing can ever reach it, and nothing can ever exceed it. This is confirmed science. It has been tested thousands of times in laboratories all over the world. So what is it that makes this speed limit so absolute? The answer to that question lies in how space and time themselves actually work. They are not separate things. They are woven together into something that is known as space-time. Light is moving through this four-dimensional fabric at exactly one single speed, and that speed is what defines the very structure of reality itself. Here is where things get even stranger. If you are sitting still right now, you are already traveling through space-time at the speed of light. You are just moving through the dimension of time instead of the dimension of space. Every single second that ticks by, you are racing through the time dimension at the maximum possible velocity. When you begin to move through space, something has to give. You begin to trade your motion through time for your motion through space. Scientists have been able to verify this by using atomic clocks. These are devices that are able to measure time with an incredible level of precision, and they are accurate to the billionths of a second. When physicists had flown some atomic clocks on airplanes back in 1971, the moving clocks had ticked slower than the identical clocks that had been left on the ground. The difference was tiny, just a few fractions of a microsecond. But it was real. It was measurable. It was a proof that Einstein had been right. The Large Hadron Collider is smashing particles together at 99.999991% of the speed of light. These particles are weighing almost nothing. The scientists are pumping enormous amounts of energy into them to be able to accelerate them, yet they can never quite reach 100%. The closer that they get, the harder it becomes. The last tiny fraction of a percent is requiring exponentially more energy than all of the energy that had come before it. This is not because our technology is limited. This is because reality itself is drawing a line in the sand and is saying this far and no farther. The speed of light is standing as an impenetrable wall that is separating what is possible from what will forever remain impossible. But why is this wall even existing at all? What is happening when you are trying to punch through it? The answer to that question is involving something that is far more sinister than you might imagine. In 1905, a 26-year-old patent clerk had published a paper that had destroyed humanity's understanding of reality. Albert Einstein was not working in a fancy laboratory. He was not surrounded by any expensive equipment. He was just sitting at a desk in Bern, Switzerland, and he was examining the patent applications for some inventors. But in his spare time, his mind was wrestling with a problem that had been confusing the scientists for decades. Light is behaving strangely. Other scientists had already noticed this. They had measured its speed from some different directions. As the Earth was orbiting the Sun, the logic was saying that the measurements should be differing. If you are running toward a thrown ball, then it is seeming to be approaching faster. If you are running away from it, then it is approaching slower. Light should be working in the same way, but it did not. The speed of light had remained a constant. It was always the same, 186,000 miles per second, no matter which direction you were measuring it from or how fast you were moving. This had made no sense under the old rules of physics. Einstein had realized something that was truly radical. What if the speed of light truly never changed? What if this constancy was the fundamental rule of the universe, and that everything else had to bend around it? What if time and space themselves were actually flexible? His paper had introduced the theory of special relativity. The theory was resting on two very simple ideas. First, the laws of physics are the same everywhere in the entire universe for anyone who is moving at a constant velocity. And second, the speed of light in empty space is always the same for every single observer, regardless of their own motion. These principles are seeming to be innocent, but their consequences are devastating. If the speed of light is always a constant, then time itself must be flexible. A clock that is moving past you will be ticking slower than your own clock. This is not an illusion. This is not a malfunction. Time is genuinely passing at different rates, and it is depending on the motion. Einstein had called this time dilation, and it has been confirmed by every single experiment that has been designed to test it. Space is flexible too. The objects that are moving at a high speed are physically shrinking in the direction of their motion. A spaceship that was traveling at 90% of the speed of light would be compressed to less than half of its original length, as it would be being measured by a stationary observer. The astronauts who were inside of it would not be noticing anything that was wrong. From their own perspective, the universe that was outside would be appearing to be compressed instead. Einstein had derived all of this by using nothing more than just logic and mathematics. He had not had any advanced technology. He had had his thought experiments. He had imagined himself riding alongside a beam of light. He had visualized what that would be looking like. The math that had followed had revealed a universe that was far stranger than anyone had ever imagined. The theory had sparked a controversy almost immediately. Many of the scientists had rejected it. Time that is changing and space that is shrinking. These ideas were violating the common sense. They were contradicting the centuries of the accepted physics that had been built on the laws of Newton. How could a patent clerk be overturning Newton? But the experiments had started to be confirming the predictions of Einstein. One after another, the tests had shown that special relativity was correctly describing reality. The time dilation was real, the length contraction was real, the equations had worked perfectly. Within just 2 decades, special relativity had become the foundation of modern physics. The theory of Einstein had revealed that mass and energy are interchangeable. He had written the most famous of all the equations in the history of science. Energy is being equal to mass times the speed of light squared. This equation is showing that the tiny amounts of mass are containing the staggering amounts of energy. It is explaining how the stars are burning. It is explaining how the nuclear weapons are releasing such devastating force. Yet the equation had also spelled the doom for the space travel. The closer that you are approaching the speed of light, the more that your energy is increasing without your velocity being increasing proportionally. Something else is growing instead. Something that is creating an insurmountable barrier. There is a mathematical demon that is hiding in the equations of Einstein, and it is destroying any hope of ever reaching the speed of light. Scientists are calling it the Lorentz factor. This single number is what is determining how much of the time dilation is occurring, how much of the length contraction is happening, and most importantly, how the reality is breaking down as you are accelerating. The formula is looking simple. It is 1 divided by the square root of 1 minus your velocity squared divided by the speed of light squared. At the everyday speeds, the Lorentz factor is being equal to 1. Your own car that is traveling at 60 miles per hour is having a Lorentz factor of 1.000000001. This is essentially 1. The time dilation at this speed is so minuscule that it is completely undetectable in the daily life. The old physics of Newton is working perfectly fine. If you are pushing up to 10% of the speed of light now, the Lorentz factor is climbing to 1.005. This is still small. The time is passing slightly slower for you compared to someone who is standing still, but the effect is barely noticeable. You would be needing some extremely precise instruments to be able to measure it. If you are jumping to 50% of the speed of light, the Lorentz factor is hitting 1.15. Now the things are getting interesting. For every single hour that is passing for you, 70 minutes are passing for someone who is at rest. The difference is becoming significant. The time dilation is starting to be affecting the actual experiences and not just the measurements. If you are accelerating to 90% of the speed of light, the Lorentz factor is exploding to 2.29. Your own clock is running at less than half of the speed of a stationary clock. For every single year that you are experiencing, more than 2 of the years are passing back on the Earth. You are time traveling into the future whether you are wanting to or not. But watch what is happening at 99%. The Lorentz factor is jumping to 7.09. For each of the years that you are aging, 7 of the years are passing on the Earth. And here is where the nightmare is truly beginning. Each of the tiny increments toward the speed of light is making the Lorentz factor be growing faster and faster. At 99.9%, the Lorentz factor is reaching 22. At 99.99%, it is hitting 71. At 99.999%, it is 224. The numbers are exploding exponentially. If you are adding another 9 to that decimal, then the factor is doubling again. The graph of the Lorentz factor is looking like a calm slope that is suddenly becoming a vertical cliff. As your velocity is approaching the speed of light, the curve is shooting upward toward the infinity. This is not just a mathematical abstraction. This is representing the real physical quantities that are going haywire. Everything that the Lorentz factor is touching is getting multiplied by its own value. Your own momentum is getting multiplied. Your own kinetic energy is getting multiplied. Your own resistance to the further acceleration is getting multiplied. As the Lorentz factor is climbing toward the infinity, so is everything else. Picture trying to be climbing a mountain where each of the steps is twice as high as the previous one. The first of the steps are easy. By the step number 10, you are climbing the walls. By the step number 20, you are scaling the cliffs that are taller than the skyscrapers. By the step number 30, the next of the steps is higher than Mount Everest. You can be keeping on climbing forever, and you will never be reaching the summit because the summit is infinitely far away. That is exactly what is happening with the speed of light. The Lorentz factor is guaranteeing that the final gap that is between your own speed and the speed of light is requiring the infinite resources to be crossing. It is not just a lot of the resources, and it is not more of the resources than humanity is possessing. It is the infinite resources, which is more of the energy than is existing in the entire observable universe. The mathematicians are confirming this. At exactly the speed of light, the Lorentz factor is becoming undefined. There is a division by 0. The equation is breaking. Reality itself is refusing to be computing. The universe is telling you something that is fundamental. This speed is being forbidden for anything that is having the mass. But what of the physical process is the Lorentz factor actually being affecting? What of the real phenomenon is it being multiplying until everything is falling apart? The momentum is about to be becoming your worst enemy. In the everyday life, the momentum is a simple thing. It is the mass times the velocity. A bowling ball that is rolling at 10 miles per hour is having the momentum. A feather that is drifting at the same speed is having much less. To be changing the momentum of an object, you are applying the force. If you are pushing harder, then the momentum is changing faster. This is working perfectly at the normal speeds. If you are doubling your velocity, then you are doubling your momentum. If you are tripling your force, then you are tripling the rate of the change of the momentum. The relationship is linear, and it is predictable, and it is manageable. Einstein had revealed that this comfortable relationship is shattering at the high velocities. In the special relativity, the momentum is not just the mass times the velocity. It is the mass times the velocity times the Lorentz factor. And as we have just been learning, the Lorentz factor can be growing without any limit. At 90% of the speed of light, your momentum is already more than twice what the old formulas of Newton would be predicting. The Lorentz factor of 2.29 is multiplying your classical momentum, and it is making you more than twice as hard to be accelerating further. You have not been gaining any of the additional mass, but you are behaving as if you are being more than twice as heavy. If you are being pushed to 99% of the speed of light now, your momentum is 7 times higher than the classical physics is predicting. Accelerating you even slightly is now requiring 7 times more of the force than the equations of Newton are suggesting. You are becoming exponentially harder to be pushing. This is creating a vicious spiral. The faster that you are going, the higher your momentum is climbing. The higher momentum is meaning that more of the force is being needed to be accelerating you. That additional force is making you be going faster, which is increasing your momentum even more, which is requiring even more of the force. The cycle is feeding on itself. At 99.999% of the speed of light, your momentum is already hundreds of the times what the classical mechanics had been predicting. You have been becoming a massive object in the terms of your resistance to the acceleration. Even though your actual mass has not been changing by a single atom, the rocket engines are firing at their full power. They are producing the same thrust as they always are, but you are barely budging. Here is what is making this truly a nightmarish thing. As you are approaching the speed of light, the Lorentz factor is approaching the infinity. That is meaning that your relativistic momentum is also approaching the infinity. An object with the infinite momentum cannot be being accelerated any further. You would be needing the infinite force to be changing the infinite momentum, even by an infinitesimal amount. Think of it like you are pushing a car. At first, the car is rolling easily. As you are gaining the speed, the air resistance is increasing. The car is becoming slightly harder to be pushing, but imagine if the car were to be becoming twice as heavy with each of the miles per hour that you are gaining. By 20 miles per hour, it would be weighing tons. By 50, it would be outmassing the buildings. By 100, it would be being heavier than the planets. You would never be reaching 200 miles per hour because the car would be becoming infinitely massive before you were getting there. That is the relativistic momentum. The closer that you are getting to the speed of light, the more of the resistance the universe is offering. And it is not because you are gaining the mass in the traditional sense. It is because the momentum itself is increasing without any bound. The particle accelerators are proving this every single day. The Large Hadron Collider is accelerating the protons in a 17-mile ring. They are pumping the enormous amounts of the energy into these tiny particles. The protons are getting closer and closer to the speed of light, and they are reaching 99.999991%, but that last of the slivers is remaining forever out of the reach. The scientists can be measuring the momentum of the protons directly. It is matching the predictions of Einstein perfectly. The relativistic momentum is growing exactly as the Lorentz factor is predicting. The particles are becoming harder and harder to be accelerating, even though they have not been gaining any of the additional mass. At exactly the speed of light, the momentum of any of the massive objects would be being literally infinite. An infinite quantity cannot be existing in the reality. The universe is drawing a line. You cannot be crossing this threshold. The laws of physics are actively preventing it by making the acceleration progressively more difficult until the further acceleration is becoming impossible. But the momentum is not the only thing that is exploding as you are accelerating. Something that is even more fundamental is beginning to be spiraling out of the control. Energy is being equal to mass times the speed of light squared. And this equation is ending all of the hope of the light speed travel. Einstein had written this formula in 1905, and it was three symbols that had rewritten the reality. The equation is revealing that the mass and the energy are two of the forms of the same thing. If you are converting a tiny bit of the mass, then you are releasing the staggering amounts of the energy. 1 single kilogram of the matter, if it were to be being completely converted, is releasing 90 quadrillion of the joules. That is the energy of 20 megatons of the TNT. This is why the sun is shining. Every single second, the sun is converting 600 million of the tons of the hydrogen into the helium. About 4 million of the tons are disappearing completely, and they are being transformed into the pure energy. That missing mass is what is powering all of the life on the Earth. The sun has been burning for 4.5 billion of the years, and it will be continuing for the billions more, all from being converting the mass to the energy. The nuclear weapons are working in the same way. A tiny fraction of the uranium or the plutonium is converting to the energy during the detonation. Less than 1% of the mass of the bomb is actually transforming. That small fraction is leveling the cities. The equation is that powerful, but the equation is working in the reverse too. The energy can be becoming the mass. This is happening constantly in the particle accelerators. The scientists are colliding the high-energy particles, and they are watching the new particles be materializing from the pure energy. The quarks, the muons, and even the antimatter are all being created from the kinetic energy that is transforming into the mass. Here is where this is destroying the space travel. As you are accelerating a spacecraft, then you are adding the kinetic energy to it. That energy has to be going somewhere. At the low speeds, it is becoming the velocity. The ship is going faster, but at the relativistic speeds, the added energy is increasingly becoming the inertia instead of the speed. The ship is becoming harder to be accelerating, as if it had been gaining the mass. The physicists had used to be describing this as the relativistic mass increase. The modern physics is not using that term anymore because it is misleading. Your own rest mass is never changing. A 1,000 kilogram spacecraft is always having a mass of 1,000 kilograms when it is being measured at rest. But its inertia, which is its resistance to the acceleration, is absolutely being increasing. If you are calculating the kinetic energy of a 1,000 kilogram spacecraft at 50% of the speed of light by using the formula of Einstein, then the answer is 15 quadrillion of the joules. That is the energy of 3.5 megatons of the TNT. Just to be reaching half of the speed of light, you are needing the explosive power of 70 of the Hiroshima bombs that have been being concentrated into moving your ship. If you are being pushed to 90% of the speed of light, then the kinetic energy is soaring to 130 quadrillion of the joules. You have been jumping from 3 of the megatons to 30 of the megatons of the equivalent. It is 10 times more of the energy for moving from 50% to 90%. The energy requirements are accelerating faster than your own velocity. At 99% of the speed of light, you are needing 630 quadrillion of the joules. That is 150 of the megatons. Your 1,000 kilogram ship is now carrying the kinetic energy of 3 of the Tsar bombers, which was the largest of the nuclear weapons that has ever been being detonated. And you are still being 1% away from the speed of light. Here is the nightmare. At exactly the speed of light, the kinetic energy formula of Einstein is dividing by 0. The energy is becoming infinite. To be accelerating even a single electron to the speed of light would be requiring all of the energy in the entire universe, and then you would be needing more, an infinite amount more. This is not an engineering problem. No amount of the better technology can be solving it. The universe is fundamentally forbidding reaching the speed of light by making the cost of the energy infinite. You can be keeping on pouring in the energy forever. You will be getting closer and closer, and you will be adding more of the nines to your 99.9999%. But you will never be reaching 100%. The Large Hadron Collider is demonstrating this brutally. It is accelerating the protons to 99.9999991% of the speed of light. The last of the tiny slivers, which is that final 0.0000009%, would be requiring more of the energy than the collider can possibly be producing. It would be being more of the energy than is existing on the Earth, and it would be being more of the energy than the Sun is generating in a year, and it would all be for the last of the microscopic fractions of a percent. Every single joule of the energy that you are adding is giving the diminishing returns. The first of the joules might be increasing your speed by the meters per second. The billionth of the joules is increasing it by the millimeters. The trillionth of the joules is buying you the micrometers. Eventually, you are spending the entire solar system's worth of the energy to be gaining a single atom's width of the additional velocity. But the energy problem is going even deeper than this, because the energy is not the only resource that is exploding as you are accelerating. The Large Hadron Collider is the attempt of humanity to be touching the speed of light, and it is failing in exactly the way that Einstein had been predicting. This machine is circling beneath the border of France and Switzerland. It is 17 miles of the superconducting magnets that have been being cooled to near the absolute zero. It is the most sophisticated of the scientific instruments that has ever been being built. Its purpose is a simple one. It is to be accelerating the particles as close to the speed of light as the physics is allowing, and then it is to be smashing them together to be seeing what is happening. The protons are entering the ring that are moving at a decent velocity already. Within the minutes, the thousands of the magnets are beginning to be accelerating them. Each of the laps around the 17-mile circuit is adding more of the energy. The protons are moving faster and faster. Each of the passes is bringing them closer to the ultimate limit. After about 20 of the minutes of the acceleration, the protons are reaching 99.9% of the speed of light. They are circling the entire ring 11,000 times per second. At this velocity, the time dilation is becoming significant. From the perspective of the protons, they are experiencing only a fraction of the time that is passing in the laboratory. But from our own perspective, they are racing around the ring at nearly the speed of light. The scientists are not stopping. More of the energy is pouring in. The magnets are keeping on pushing. The protons are accelerating to 99.99%. Then it is 99.999%. Each of the additional nines is requiring exponentially more of the energy than all of the previous acceleration combined. Finally, the protons are reaching their maximum velocity, which is 99.999991% of the speed of light. This had taken the enormous amounts of the electrical power. The collider is consuming as much of the electricity as a small city. Most of that energy had been going into this final fraction of a percent. Why can they not be going faster? The collider is producing its maximum power. The magnets are at their peak strength. But the protons are simply refusing to be accelerating further. And it is not because the machine is weak. It is because the relativistic momentum of the protons has been growing so enormous that even the strongest of the magnetic fields that humanity can be generating are barely budging them. From the frame of the laboratory, those protons are having a Lorentz factor of about 7,400. Their kinetic energy is 7,400 times their rest mass energy. They are carrying the momentum of the particles that are being thousands of the times heavier. Even though each of the protons is having a mass that is exactly the same as when it had been starting, the scientists can be measuring everything with the exquisite precision. They are tracking the individual protons. They are measuring their energy. They are calculating their momentum. Every single one of the measurements is confirming the equations of Einstein perfectly. The relativistic formulas are predicting exactly how these particles are behaving at the extreme velocities. When two of the protons are colliding at this speed, then their combined kinetic energy is so immense that it is materializing into the new particles. The quarks are appearing, the gluons are flashing into the existence. Sometimes Even the Higgs bosons, which are the particles that are giving the other particles their mass, are emerging from the collision. The pure energy is transforming into the matter exactly as the equation of Einstein is predicting. The collider has been running for over 15 years. The scientists have been performing the trillions of the collisions. They have been accelerating the countless protons. Not once has any of the particles been exceeding the speed of light. Not once has any of the particles even been reaching the speed of light. The barrier is remaining absolute. The other particle accelerators that are around the world are showing the identical results. There is the Fermilab in the United States, and there are the older machines of CERN, and there is the SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory. Every single one of the accelerators that is pushing the particles to the extreme speeds is hitting the same wall. It is 99-point-something%. That final fraction is remaining forever unreachable. These machines are not just proving that nothing can be reaching the speed of light. They are proving why. The energy requirements are exploding. The momentum is growing without any bound. Every single one of the predictions of the special relativity is manifesting in the measurable, verifiable ways. The physics is not just the theory. It is the experimental fact that has been being tested billions of the times. If we cannot even be accelerating a single proton to the speed of light despite being using our most powerful of the machines, then how could we ever be accelerating an entire spaceship, a vessel that is weighing thousands of the tons? The scaling is so ridiculous that it is crossing from being difficult into being impossible. Yet, the story is getting stranger still, because even if you could be somehow ignoring all of these problems, and even if you could be magically reaching the speed of light, then you would be encountering something that is even more bizarre than the energy barriers. You would be discovering that you are already traveling at the speed of light. Right now you are moving at the speed of light through the space-time at this exact moment. This is sounding impossible. You are sitting still and you are reading these words, and you are not moving at 186,000 of the miles per second. But in the deepest sense, you absolutely are. You are just moving through the time instead of the space. The mathematics of Einstein had been revealing that the space and the time are not being separate things. They are being the dimensions of a single four-dimensional structure that is called the space-time. There are three of the dimensions of the space, which are the left and the right, the forward and the backward, and the up and the down. And there is one of the dimensions of the time, which is the past and the future. These four dimensions are combining into one single unified fabric. Every single one of the objects in the entire universe is having a four-dimensional velocity through the space-time. This velocity is always being exactly the speed of light. It is always being this way. There are no exceptions. Every single particle, every single person, and every single planet is moving through the space-time at precisely the speed of light. This is the foundational rule from which all of the special relativity is flowing. Think about the directions on the surface of the Earth. You can be moving to the north, and you can be moving to the east, and you can be moving to the northeast, and you can be combining both of the directions, but you are having the limited speed. If you are driving at 60 of the miles per hour to the northeast, then you might be going 40 of the miles per hour to the north and 40 of the miles per hour to the east. The two components are combining to be giving your total speed. The space-time is working similarly, except that the dimensions are being the space and the time instead of the north and the east. You are having a total velocity through the space-time of exactly the speed of light. You can be dividing this velocity between being moving through the space and being moving through the time, but the total is always being equal to the speed of light. When you are sitting still in the space, then 100% of your space-time velocity is going into being, moving through the time. You are traveling into the future at the maximum speed, which is 1 second per second. That is sounding trivial, but it is actually being the speed of light through the dimension of the time. If you are starting to be moving through the space and you are walking across the room, then now a tiny fraction of your space-time velocity is shifting from the dimension of the time to the dimensions of the space. You are moving through the space at 3 of the miles per hour. That is meaning that you must be moving through the time slightly slower. Your clock is ticking a tiny bit slower than a stationary clock is. The effect is immeasurably small at the walking speed, but it is real. Your own watch is genuinely running slower by an infinitesimal amount, and it is not because anything is being wrong with your watch. It is because you are diverting some of your space-time velocity from the time into the space. If you are getting on an airplane that is flying at 500 of the miles per hour, then more of your space-time velocity is shifting into the spatial motion. Your watch is now running measurably slower than the ground-based clocks are. The difference is tiny, and it is just the nanoseconds per flight. But the atomic clocks can be measuring it, and they are doing so. If you are accelerating to half of the speed of light, then now you have been diverting half of your space-time velocity into the spatial motion. That is meaning that you are only moving through the time at the half of the speed. Your clock is ticking at the half of the rate of a stationary clock. For every single one of the hours that you are experiencing, 2 of the hours are passing for someone who is at rest. At 99% of the speed of light, nearly all of your space-time velocity is going into the spatial motion. Only a tiny fraction is remaining for the motion through the time. Your clock is crawling along. The time is passing 7 times slower for you than it is for the stationary observers. What is happening at exactly the speed of light? 100% of your space-time velocity would be being directed into the spatial motion. 0% would be remaining for the temporal motion. Your own clock would be stopping completely. The time would be freezing. No time would be passing at all from your own perspective. This is why the photons are not experiencing the time. A photon that has been being emitted from a star that is 1 million of the light years away is traveling for 1 million of the years from our own perspective. But from the perspective of the photon, if it had been having one, no time is passing. It is 0. The photon is being created and it is being absorbed in the same instant. The entire journey is happening in precisely 0 of the time. It is experiencing no duration whatsoever. It is moving all of its space-time velocity through the space. The massive objects can never be doing this. You can be approaching the speed of light. You can be getting 99.999% of the way there. But you can never be quite shifting 100% of your space-time velocity into the spatial dimensions, because that would be requiring the infinite energy. There is always some of the residual motion through the time. You can be slowing your clock dramatically. You cannot be stopping it completely. The universe is enforcing this rule ruthlessly. Your own total space-time velocity is being fixed at the speed of light. You can be trading the space for the time or the time for the space, but you can never be exceeding the total. The speed of light is not just being the fastest that you can be moving through the space. It is the speed that you are already moving through the space-time right now. This realization is leading to the even stranger of the implications. Because if moving faster through the space is meaning moving slower through the time, then the extreme velocities are creating the extreme time distortions. Every single one of the miles per hour that you are gaining through the space is costing you the seconds that are being lost through the time. This trade-off is the very core of the special relativity. It is not being negotiable. It is not something that the clever engineering can be overcoming. It is being woven into the mathematical structure of the space-time itself. If you are moving faster through the space, then you are moving slower through the time. The exchange rate is being determined by the Lorentz factor. At the everyday speeds, the trade-off is invisible. If you are driving at 60 of the miles per hour, then your clock is losing about 2 of the quadrillionths of a second per hour compared to a stationary clock. This is so small that no clock that the humans have ever been building could be measuring it directly. For the practical purposes, it might as well be being 0. The International Space Station is orbiting at 17,500 of the miles per hour. The astronauts who are aboard are losing about 7 of the microseconds per day compared to the ground-based clocks. This is still being tiny, and it is still being nearly undetectable without the atomic clocks, but now it is being measurable. The scientists can be tracking this difference. The GPS satellites are orbiting at 14,000 of the miles per hour. They are also being higher in the gravity field of the Earth, which is creating the additional time dilation effects. Combined, the clocks of the GPS satellites are running about 38 of the microseconds per day, faster than the ground clocks are. This is mattering enormously. Your own GPS navigation is relying on the extremely precise timing. If the engineers had not been accounting for the relativistic effects, then the GPS would be accumulating the errors of several of the miles per day. Your own smartphone is compensating for the relativity every single time that you are using the navigation. The device is receiving the signals from the multiple satellites, and it is calculating the distances that are being based on the travel times of the signals, and it is then determining your position. If the clocks of the satellites had not been being corrected for the relativistic time dilation, then the calculated distances would be being wrong. Your own position on the map would be drifting. This is not being theoretical. The early engineers of the GPS had been debating whether the relativistic corrections were being necessary. Some had been arguing that the effects were being too small to be mattering. They were being wrong. When the system had been being launched, the satellites had been being deliberately programmed with the slower clock rates to be compensating for the predicted relativistic effects. If those corrections had been being removed, then the GPS would be failing within the minutes. So the relativity is not being optional, it is being essential. Every single one of the GPS devices in the entire world is depending on this. Your own car navigation and the maps of your phone and the aircraft navigation systems and the missile guidance and the ship positioning and the survey equipment, all of it is requiring the relativistic time corrections. Without the equations of Einstein, the modern navigation would be being impossible. The GPS satellites have been being operating since 1978. There have been being billions of the position calculations daily, and there have been being trillions over the decades. Every single one of them is confirming the special and the general relativity. The time dilation is real. The gravitational effects are real. The corrections are working. This is the continuous experimental verification of the relativity, and it is not a one-time experiment, and it is not a laboratory curiosity. It is the working technology that the billions of the people are using daily. Your own smartphone is a relativity verification device that you are carrying in your own pocket. The other satellite systems are working in the same way. The GLONASS of Russia and the Galileo of Europe and the Beidou of China are all including the identical relativistic corrections. The different orbits are meaning the different corrections, but the same physics is applying. The time dilation is universal. Even the International Space Station is experiencing the time dilation. At an altitude of 250 miles orbiting at 17500 miles per hour, astronauts age about 7 microseconds less per day. That's compared to people on Earth. Over the 6 of the months in the space, they are returning about a millisecond younger than if they had been staying on the ground. The effects are being tiny at these velocities, but they are being real and they are being measurable and they are being confirmed. Every single one of the spacecraft and every single one of the satellites and every single one of the high-speed particles, they are all experiencing the time dilation exactly as the special relativity is predicting. But the GPS satellites are not being the only proof that is falling from the sky. There is an even more dramatic demonstration that is happening right now in the upper atmosphere. The cosmic rays are smashing into the atmosphere 12 of the miles above your own head, and they are creating the particles that should not be being existing long enough to be reaching the ground. Yet they are doing so. The cosmic rays are the high-energy particles that are from the space, and they are mostly being the protons. They are slamming into the nitrogen and the oxygen molecules in the upper atmosphere at nearly the speed of light. These collisions are creating the showers of the new particles, and among them are being the muons. The muons are being like the heavy electrons. They are having the same electric charge, and they are having about 200 times more of the mass, and they are being fundamentally unstable. A muon at rest will be decaying into an electron and 2 of the neutrinos with a half-life of 2.2 of the microseconds. That is 2.2 of the millionths of a second. If you are blinking, then a muon is being long gone. If you are doing the math, then the light is traveling at 186,000 of the miles per second. In 2.2 of the microseconds, and even if it were to be traveling at the speed of light, a muon could only be covering about 2,000 of the feet before half of them are decaying. After another 2 of the microseconds, half of the remaining muons are decaying. After 10 of the microseconds, over 97% have been disappearing. The collisions of the cosmic rays are happening about 12 of the miles up. That is being 63,360 of the feet. If the muons are traveling at the speed of light, but they are decaying after being covering 2,000 of the feet, then almost none of them should be reaching the ground. You would be needing to be going through 31 of the half-lives to be traveling 12 of the miles. After 31 of the half-lives, less than 1 in 2 billion of the muons are surviving. If you are placing a muon detector at the sea level, then according to the classical physics, you should be barely detecting any of the muons. It would be being maybe a handful per hour on a sensitive detector. The vast majority of them should be decaying long before they are reaching the ground. If you are running the experiment, then the detector is clicking constantly. There are hundreds of the muons per hour, and there are the thousands. It is far, far more than the classical physics is predicting. The muons are reaching the ground, despite theoretically not having enough of the time to be making the journey. This had been puzzling the physicists before the relativity. The numbers had not been adding up. The muons were surviving the impossible journeys. Something was allowing them to be traveling the distances that they should not be able to be reaching. The time dilation of Einstein is solving it perfectly. The muons from the collisions of the cosmic rays are moving at about 99.5% of the speed of light. At this velocity, the Lorentz factor is roughly 10. From our own reference frame, the internal clocks of the muons are running 10 times slower than the normal. Their 2.2 of the microsecond half-life is stretching to 22 of the microseconds from our own perspective. At the speed of light, 22 of the microseconds is allowing the travelling of about 13,000 of the feet instead of 2,000. This is still not enough to be covering 12 of the miles. But here is the key. From the reference frame of the muons, something different is happening. There is the length contraction. The 12-mile distance is shrinking to 1.2 of the miles. The muons are only needing to be surviving long enough to be traveling 1.2 of the miles, which they can easily be doing in 2.2 of the microseconds. Both of the perspectives are giving the same result. From our own frame, the muons are living longer. From the frame of the muons, the distance is shorter. Either way, the muons are reaching the ground in the numbers that are matching the relativistic predictions perfectly. The scientists have been measuring this extensively. The detectors at the various altitudes are counting the rates of the muons. There is Mount Washington in New Hampshire, and there is Pikes Peak in Colorado, and there are the sea level detectors all over the world. The altitude distribution of the muons is matching the equations of Einstein precisely. There are more of the muons at the higher altitudes, and there are fewer at the sea level. The decay rate is following the relativistic time dilation curve exactly. This is not being a one-time experiment. This is the continuous verification. Every single second of every single day, the thousands of the muons are demonstrating the time dilation. They are the natural particle accelerators that have been being created by the universe, and they are proving the relativity automatically. You can be building your own muon detector. Several of the universities are offering the plans. Some of the high school students have been building the working detectors in their own garages. If you are putting one at the sea level, then you will be counting the muons all day and all night. Those muons are the direct proof that the time dilation is real. The particle physics labs are exploiting this. When they are accelerating the muons in the storage rings, then the muons are living longer than they would be at rest. The decay rate is depending exactly on the velocity. At 99% of the speed of light, and at 99.9%, the higher the velocity is, the longer the muons are surviving, and it is matching the relativistic predictions every single time. The muons are not being special. All of the unstable particles are behaving in this way. There are the pions, and there are the kaons, and there are the tau particles. Every single one of the particles with a finite lifetime is living longer when it is moving fast. The time dilation is applying universally. It is not being about the muons specifically. It is being about the time itself that is working differently for the objects that are in the motion. But all of these examples are involving the tiny particles or the atomic clocks that are showing the nanosecond differences. Is there any way to be seeing the relativistic effects on the larger scales? Is there any way that the universe is demonstrating these principles in the ways that the humans can be more directly grasping? For the thousands of the years that humanity had been wondering whether the light was being traveling instantly or was being taking the time to be crossing the distances. And the answer would eventually be revealing the deepest speed limit of the universe. The ancient Greeks had been debating the nature of the light. Empedocles had been arguing the light is taking the time to be traveling. Aristotle had been disagreeing, and he had been claiming that the light was moving instantly. No experiment could be settling the debate. The light had been seeming to be too fast to be measuring. In 1638, Galileo had been trying. He and an assistant had been standing on the hilltops that were several of the miles apart at the night. Each of them had been holding a shuttered lantern. Galileo would be uncovering his lantern. The moment that his assistant had been seeing the flash, he would be uncovering his own. Galileo would be measuring how long the return flash had been taking. The experiment had been failing completely. The human reaction time is being about 200 of the milliseconds. The light is crossing several of the miles in the mere microseconds. Galileo could not possibly be detecting such a brief delay. He had been concluding only that the light was being extremely fast and that it was perhaps being instantaneous. The breakthrough had been coming from the astronomy. In 1676, the Danish astronomer Ole Rømer had been studying the moon of Jupiter, that is Io. Io is orbiting Jupiter every 1.769 of the days, and it is passing into the shadow of Jupiter each of its orbits. These eclipses should be happening at the predictable intervals. Rømer had been noticing something strange. When the Earth was moving away from Jupiter in its own orbit, the eclipses of Io had been arriving late. When the Earth was approaching Jupiter, the eclipses had been arriving early. The timing errors had been accumulating to more than 10 of the minutes over several of the months. Rømer had been realizing that the light must be having a finite speed. When the Earth was being farther from Jupiter, the light had been having to be traveling a greater distance to be reaching the Earth. The accumulated delay had been revealing how much of the additional distance the light had been traveling. From this, Rømer had been calculating the speed of the light at about 140,000 of the miles per second. The true value is being 186,000 of the miles per second. The estimate of Rømer was being low because the estimates of the size of the orbit of the Earth had been being inaccurate in 1676, but he had been proving the critical point. The light is having a measurable finite speed. In 1849, the French physicist Hippolyte Fizeau had been making the first Earth-based measurement. He had been using a rapidly spinning toothed wheel. A beam of the light had been passing through a gap that was between the teeth, and it had been traveling 5 of the miles to a mirror, and it had been reflecting back. If the wheel was being rotating at just the right speed, then the return beam would be hitting a tooth and be being blocked. By measuring the rotation speed, Fizeau had been calculating the velocity of the light. His answer was being 195,000 of the miles per second. This was being close, and it was getting better. Over the next of the decades, the increasingly sophisticated experiments had been refining the measurement. By the late 1800s, the scientists had been knowing the speed of the light to within 1% of the modern value. These measurements had been revealing something peculiar. The speed of the light had been appearing to be being constant. There had been the different experimenters, and there had been the different methods, and there had been the different conditions. Everyone had been measuring essentially the same value. This had been seeming strange because the speeds are usually depending on the reference frame. In 1887, Albert Michelson and Edward Morley had been performing a crucial experiment. They had been splitting a beam of the light, and they had been sending the components in the perpendicular directions, and they had then been recombining them. As the Earth had been orbiting the Sun, the orientation of the apparatus had been changing relative to the motion of the Earth. The classical physics had been predicting that the travel time of the light should be varying, and it should be depending on whether it was moving with or against the motion of the Earth. The experiment had been detecting no variation. The speed of the light was being the same in all of the directions, regardless of the motion of the Earth through the space. This had been making no sense under the classical physics. How could the speed of the light be being independent of the motion of the observer? Einstein had been resolving this in 1905 with the special relativity. He had been making the constant speed of the light a fundamental postulate. The speed of the light is not being constant because there is something that is special about the light. It is being constant because the space-time itself is having this property. The speed of the light is the conversion factor that is between the space and the time. It is being built into the geometry of the universe. The modern measurements are giving the vacuum speed of the light as being exactly 186,282.397 of the miles per second. This value is now being defined and not being measured. The meter itself is being defined as the distance that the light is traveling in 1,299,792,458ths of a second. The humanity had been spending the millennia that were discovering the speed of the light. Once we had been knowing it, then we had been discovering that it was the universal speed limit. Nothing can be going faster. The measurement that had been beginning with the failed lantern experiment of Galileo had been ending up revealing one of the most fundamental of the laws of the universe. But why is the speed of light being constant? What is making this particular velocity so special? The speed of light is not just being the fastest that anything can be going. It is the exchange rate that is between the space and the time, and this is making it invariant across the entire universe. In the everyday life, the speeds are adding up. You are being on a train that is moving at 50 of the miles per hour. If you are walking forward at 3 of the miles per hour, then from the ground you are moving at 53 of the miles per hour. It is a simple addition. This is working fine at the normal velocities, but it is breaking down near the speed of light. Imagine a spacecraft that is moving at 90% of the speed of light. If you are shining a flashlight forward from inside of the ship, then the classical physics is saying that the light should be moving at 1.9 times the speed of light from the perspective of an outside observer. It would be the speed of the light plus the speed of the ship. This is never happening. The outside observer is measuring the light that is moving at exactly the speed of light. It is always being this way. The light is not being traveling faster just because it had been being emitted from a moving source. The speed of the light is absolute. It is not being depending on the motion of the source or the observer. This is seeming to be impossible. How can the light be being moving at the same speed for both the person on the ship and the stationary observer? The ship is being moving at 90% of the speed of light relative to the observer. Shouldn't their measurements be differing? They are being differing, but they are not being doing so in the speed of the light. They are being differing in the time and the space themselves. The person on the ship is experiencing the time that is being slower than the stationary observer is. The distances are appearing to be being contracted from the perspective of the ship. These distortions are perfectly compensating. Both of the observers are measuring the identical speed of the light despite their relative motion. The mathematics of Einstein is showing that this must be happening. If the speed of the light is being constant, then the space and the time must be being flexible. There is no other possibility. The universe cannot be simultaneously having the constant speed of the light and the absolute time. Something has to be giving. The time and the space are giving. Why is the speed of the light specifically the constant that is never changing? Because it is not really being about the light at all. It is being about the structure of the space-time itself. The speed of the light is the maximum rate at which the cause can be becoming the effect. It is the speed at which the causality is propagating through the entire universe. Think of it as the frame rate of the universe. The reality is updating at a certain maximum speed. The information cannot be traveling faster than this speed because the universe cannot be processing the events faster than this. The light is moving at this speed because the photons are being massless. Anything that is being massless is automatically moving at the universal update rate. The massive objects are moving slower because they cannot be keeping up with the maximum update speed. The more of the mass there is, the more of the inertia there is. And the slower the maximum speed is, only the massless particles are reaching the ultimate limit. The light, the gluons, and the gravitational waves are all being massless, and they are all traveling at exactly c. The value of 186,000 of the miles per second is not being arbitrary. It is a consequence of how the electromagnetic forces are working. The equations of Maxwell from the 1860s had been predicting that the electromagnetic waves would be traveling at a specific speed that was being calculable from the properties of the electric and the magnetic fields. That speed had been turning out to be matching the measured speed of the light. The speed of the light is emerging from the deeper physics. It is not being a random number that the universe had been picking. It is a consequence of the properties of the electromagnetic forces, which are themselves deriving from the quantum field theory, which is deriving from the even deeper principles that we are still being uncovering. But regardless of why this particular value, the fact that it is being constant is having the profound implications. The constant speed of the light is forcing the time dilation and the length contraction. These are not being separate phenomena. They are being the necessary consequences of the invariance of the speed of the light. Every single one of the attempts to be measuring the speed of the light, regardless of the motion of the observer, is yielding the same value. Whether you are moving toward a light source, or you are moving away from it, or you are standing still, or you are spinning, or you are accelerating, it is not mattering. The light is always being approaching at 186,000 of the miles per second. This constancy is perhaps being the most well-verified fact in all of the physics. The constancy of the speed of the light is what is making the GPS be working. It is why the particle accelerators are behaving as they are doing. It is why the time dilation and the length contraction are occurring. It is the foundation of the modern physics. If you were to be changing this one property, then the entire universe would be working differently. The constancy of the speed of the light is not being a speed limit in the sense of a rule that you could be breaking. It is being more like the exchange rate that is between two of the currencies. You cannot be making the exchange rate be being different by being wanting it badly. It is a property of the system itself. The speed of the light is the exchange rate that is between the space and the time. That rate is being fixed by the geometry of the universe. This is leading to something that had been confusing the people for the decades. Because if the speed of the light is being constant and the motion through the space is being trading off with the motion through the time, then what is happening to your mass as you are accelerating? Is it being increasing? The answer had been surprising the physicists. Your own mass is not being increasing as you are approaching the speed of light. And understanding this is correcting one of the most common of the misunderstandings of the physics. For the decades, the physics teachers had been telling the students that the mass is increasing with the velocity. The textbooks had been calling it the relativistic mass. The idea had been seeming to be intuitive. As you are going faster then, you are becoming harder to be accelerating. This is looking like you are gaining the mass. If the mass is being increasing, then that is explaining why reaching the speed of light is being impossible. Your own mass would be becoming infinite. This explanation is being wrong, or at least it is being misleading. The modern physics is not being using the relativistic mass anymore because the mass is not actually being increasing. Something else is. Your own rest mass is being invariant. A 1,000 kilogram spacecraft is having 1,000 kilograms of the rest mass, whether it is being parked or it is being flying at 99% of the speed of light. If you are putting it on a scale when it is being stationary, then it is reading 1,000 kilograms. The mass is literally not being changing. What is being changing is the inertia, which is the resistance to the acceleration. At 99% of the speed of light, the spacecraft is resisting the acceleration as if it had been having 7,000 kilograms instead of 1,000. But this is not being because it had been gaining 6,000 kilograms of the mass. It is being because the relativistic momentum is growing with the Lorentz factor. The distinction is mattering. The mass is a source of the gravitational fields. If a spacecraft had been actually gaining the mass while it was being moving, then its gravitational pull would be being increasing. A fast-moving ship would be having the stronger gravity than a stationary one. This is not being happening. The gravitational field of the ship is not being changing with the velocity. A 1,000 kilogram spacecraft is generating the same gravitational pull whether it is being parked or it is being moving at near the speed of light. Its gravity is pulling the other objects with the force that is corresponding to 1,000 kilograms and not to 7,000. The mass has not been being increasing, and only the inertia has. Why had the physicists ever been talking about the relativistic mass? Because it had been a convenient teaching shortcut. If you are multiplying the rest mass by the Lorentz factor, then you are getting a quantity that is working in many of the relativistic equations. It is making the formulas be looking more familiar to the students who are learning the relativity for the first time. But the relativistic mass is creating more of the confusion than it is solving. The students are thinking that the mass is genuinely increasing. They are incorrectly predicting the stronger gravity for the fast-moving objects. They are misunderstanding what is being physically changing. The modern physics education has largely been abandoning the concept. What is actually being increasing is the relationship between the momentum and the energy. Your own total energy is growing with the Lorentz factor. Your own momentum is growing with the Lorentz factor, but your own rest mass is staying constant. The growth in the energy and the momentum is creating the increased resistance to the acceleration without requiring the actual mass increase. The famous equation of Einstein is usually being written as E equals mc squared, but this is only being valid for the objects that are at rest. The full equation is E squared equals p squared times c squared plus m squared times c to the fourth. E as being the total energy, p as being the momentum, m as being the rest mass, and c is being the speed of light. For an object that is at rest, the momentum is being 0. The equation is simplifying to E equals mc squared. But for a moving object, both of the terms are contributing. The momentum term is growing with the velocity. At the high speeds, it is dominating. The total energy is exploding toward the infinity, even though the rest mass is staying constant. This is why the acceleration is becoming impossible at the speed of light. It is not being because the mass is becoming infinite. It is being because the momentum term is becoming infinite. The energy that is being required to be further increasing the momentum is approaching the infinity. You cannot be adding the infinite energy. The acceleration is stopping. The particle accelerators are proving this constantly. They are accelerating the protons to within a fraction of a percent of the speed of light. The rest mass of the protons is never changing. Their inertia is increasing enormously. Their resistance to the further acceleration is growing with the Lorentz factor. But if you were to be weighing them, then they would still be showing their original rest mass. The misunderstanding that is about the relativistic mass had probably been causing the confusion for the thousands of the students. Some of them had been going on that were believing that the mass was genuinely increasing. They might have been asking the questions like whether the gravitational effects are increasing for the fast spacecraft. The answer is no, because the mass is being invariant. The physics has been correcting this. The modern textbooks are teaching the rest mass as being invariant, and they are explaining the time dilation and the length contraction as the true relativistic effects. This is giving a clearer picture of what is actually happening physically. Your own rest mass is a property of the matter itself. It is not being depending on the motion. It is the m in E equals mc squared. It is the quantity that is determining the gravitational pull. It is never changing, regardless of the velocity. What is changing is how that mass is responding to the forces and how difficult it is to be accelerating it further and how much of the momentum and the energy it is carrying. The misconception had been arising from the well-meaning attempts to be simplifying the relativity, but sometimes the simplifications are creating more of the problems than they are solving. The truth is actually being cleaner. Your own mass is staying constant, the space-time is warping around you as you are moving, and the structure of the reality is making the infinite acceleration impossible. But if the mass is staying constant, yet the acceleration is becoming impossible, then where exactly is all of that energy going? Let's be trying to be accelerating a spacecraft to 99% of the speed of light, and be watching the numbers, be becoming the nightmares. Let's be starting with a modest vessel which is 10,000 kilograms, and it is about the mass of a large van. It is not a massive starship, and it is just a small crew capsule with the minimal supplies. We are wanting to be pushing this craft to 99% of the speed of light. How much of the energy are we needing? The relativistic kinetic energy formula of Einstein is giving the answer. At 99% of the speed of light, the Lorentz factor is 7.089. If you are plugging in the numbers, then you are getting 4.5 times 10 to the power of 20 joules. That is 450 exajoules. What is this number meaning in the practical terms? A ton of the TNT is releasing about 4 billion of the joules when it is being detonated. Our own spacecraft is needing the equivalent of 112 million of the tons of the TNT. That is over 2,000 times the energy of the largest of the nuclear weapons that has ever been built. The Tsar bomber had been releasing 50 of the megatons. We are needing 2,250 of the Tsar bombers' worth of the energy just to be accelerating one single small spacecraft. The United States is using about 100 quadrillion of the joules of the energy per year in total. This is every single one of the power plants and every single one of the vehicles and every single one of the devices. Our own spacecraft is needing about 0.5% of the annual energy consumption of America for a single launch, and it is for one single small vessel that is carrying maybe 3 of the people. If you are scaling up to 99.9% of the speed of light, then the energy requirement is multiplying by 3. Now you are needing 1,400 exajoules. That is 1.4% of the yearly energy use of America. For each of the additional 9s that you are adding to the decimal, the energy is approximately doubling. At 99.99% of the speed of light, you are needing 4,400 exajoules, which is 4.4% of the annual energy of America. Getting closer to the speed of light is becoming exponentially more expensive with each of the fractions of a percent. These calculations are assuming the perfect efficiency. Every single joule that you are putting in is becoming the kinetic energy of the spacecraft. There are no losses, and there is no waste, and there is the perfect conversion. The real rockets are nowhere near this efficient. The chemical rockets are converting maybe 3% of the fuel energy into the kinetic energy. The ion drives are managing 40% on a good day. If you are factoring in the realistic efficiency, then the numbers are getting far worse. But even with the perfect efficiency, where is this energy being coming from? You cannot be carrying it with you in the batteries. The best of the battery technology is storing about 1 million of the joules per kilogram. To be carrying 4.5 times 10 to the power of 20 of the joules, then you would be needing 450 trillion of the kilograms of the batteries. That is being 45 million times more massive than the spacecraft itself. The solar panels will not be working. At the orbit of the Earth, the sunlight is delivering about 1,400 of the watts per square meter. To be collecting 4.5 times 10 to the power of 20 of the joules in a reasonable time frame, then you would be needing the solar arrays that were being larger than the continents they would be being running for the years. The nuclear reactors, a large nuclear power plant, is generating about 1 billion of the watts. If it is running continuously for one single year, then it is producing about 3.1 times 10 to the power of 16 of the joules. You would be needing 14,000 of the power plants that were being running for one single year to be accumulating enough of the energy for a single launch. The Earth is having about 450 of the nuclear reactors in total. The International Space Station had been taking 13 of the years and over 100 billion of the dollars to be building. It is having a mass of 420,000 of the kilograms, and it is orbiting at 17,000 of the miles per hour. Accelerating it to 99% of the speed of light would be requiring about 19 million times more of the energy than it had been taking to be launching it to the orbit. These numbers are not just being big, they are being on a civilization scale. Accelerating the spacecraft to the relativistic speeds is requiring the energy resources that are being beyond what the humanity is currently producing. And it is not being doing so by a little, but by the factors of the thousands or the millions. We are not being talking about the better rockets. We are being talking about the energy production that is exceeding our entire planetary infrastructure. And we have not even been addressing the hardest of the problems yet, because the spacecraft cannot just be accumulating the energy magically. They have to be carrying the fuel. And the fuel problem is making the energy problem be looking trivial. The rockets must be carrying their own fuel, and this is creating a catastrophic mathematical trap that is destroying any hope of the relativistic travel. The rocket equation is governing all of the spacecraft. It is what is called the Tsiolkovsky equation, and it is being named after the Russian scientist who had been deriving it in 1897. The formula is relating your own final velocity to your own initial mass, your own final mass, and your own exhaust velocity. More of the fuel is meaning the higher speed, but you have to be carrying that fuel, which is making you being heavier, which is requiring more of the fuel. This is creating the exponential growth. To be going twice as fast, then you are not needing twice as much of the fuel, you are needing exponentially more. The equation is containing a natural logarithm. The small changes in the velocity are requiring the large changes in the fuel mass ratio. For the chemical rockets, the exhaust velocity is topping out at around 10,000 of the miles per hour. To be reaching the orbital velocity of 17,000 of the miles per hour, then you are needing about 9 of the kilograms of the fuel for every single kilogram of the payload. The rocket is being 90% of the fuel by its mass. That is being manageable. We are doing it regularly. Now let's be aiming for 1% of the speed of light, which is about 6,700,000 of the miles per hour. With the chemical rockets, you would be needing a fuel-to-payload ratio that was so large that it would be exceeding the mass of the observable universe. The chemical propulsion is completely useless for the relativistic speeds. The ion drives are doing better. The exhaust velocities are reaching 120,000 of the miles per hour. This is much more efficient. For 1% of the speed of light, you are needing about 60 of the kilograms of the fuel per kilogram of the payload. That is being theoretically achievable. It is being difficult, but it is being possible. If you are pushing to 10% of the speed of light, then the ion drives are now requiring about 6 million of the kilograms of the fuel per kilogram of the payload. Your 1,000 kilogram spacecraft is needing 6 billion of the kilograms of the fuel. That is being 6 million of the tons. The entire International Space Station is having a mass of 420 of the tons. Your own fuel alone is having a mass that is 14,000 times more than that of the ISS. At 50% of the speed of light, even with perfect matter-antimatter annihilation providing maximum theoretical efficiency, you would still need 1.7 kilograms of fuel. That's for every single kilogram of payload you want to deliver. So a 1,000 kilogram spacecraft is requiring 1,700 of the kilograms of the fuel. The total launch mass is being 2,700 of the kilograms. This is being difficult, but it is being theoretically within the physics. But you are also needing to be slowing down at your destination. The deceleration is requiring the same amount of the fuel as the acceleration is. Now you are needing to be carrying the deceleration fuel during the acceleration. The fuel mass ratio is squaring. Instead of 1.7, you are needing about 4.6 of the kilograms of the fuel per kilogram of the payload. This is still being barely manageable. If you are jumping to 90% of the speed of light with the perfect matter-antimatter annihilation, then you are needing 6.6 of the kilograms of the fuel per kilogram of the payload for the one-way travel. For a round trip with the deceleration and the acceleration back home, then you are needing 43 of the kilograms of the fuel per kilogram of the payload. Your 1,000 kilogram spacecraft is requiring 43,000 of the kilograms of the fuel. At 99% of the speed of light, the numbers are exploding. There are being 14 of the kilograms of the perfect fuel per kilogram of the payload for the one-way, and there are being 200 of the kilograms for a round trip with the stops. Your 1,000 kilogram spacecraft is needing 200,000 of the kilograms of the antimatter fuel. Where exactly are you getting 200 of the tons of the antimatter? The humanity has been producing about 20 of the nanograms of the antimatter in total throughout its history. That is being 20 of the billionths of a gram. We are needing 200,000 of the kilograms. We are being short by a factor of 10 trillion. At the current production rates, then, we would be needing the trillions of the years to be accumulating enough of the antimatter for one single ship. Even if we could be producing the antimatter, then storing it is being impossible with the current technology. The antimatter is annihilating instantly on the contact with the normal matter. It must be being confined in the magnetic traps. The largest of the antimatter traps that has ever been built is holding about 1/10000000th of a gram. Scaling to the tons is being the pure fantasy. You would be needing the magnetic containment systems that were being so powerful and so reliable that they were never failing even briefly. A single glitch and your entire fuel load is detonating with the force that is exceeding all of the nuclear weapons that have ever been built combined. Your own spacecraft would be vaporizing along with everything that was nearby. Even if you had been solving the production and the storage, then using the antimatter as the rocket fuel is presenting the engineering nightmares, the annihilation is producing the gamma rays. These high-energy photons are not providing the thrust directly. You are needing to be converting the gamma radiation into the charged particles that the magnetic nozzles can be directing. The efficiency is dropping. The heat is becoming a massive problem. The perfect matter-antimatter annihilation is producing the temperatures that are beyond anything that can be existing in the normal matter. There are billions of the degrees. Nothing can be withstanding this. Your own reaction chamber would be vaporizing instantly. You are needing the plasma containment and the magnetic deflection and the cooling systems that are pushing the absolute limits of the physics. And after solving all of these problems, then you are still not able to be reaching the speed of light. You can be barely reaching 99%. The fuel ratios are remaining stubbornly enormous. The perfect fuel is only shifting the impossible a bit closer to being extremely difficult. It is not making the speed of light be being achievable. Some of the physicists have been proposing the matter-antimatter beam propulsion. You could be generating the antimatter at a space station, and you could be beaming it to the spacecraft as it is accelerating. This is avoiding carrying the fuel. But now you are needing to be beaming the antimatter across the billions of the miles with the perfect precision while your own target is moving at near the speed of light. The targeting and the timing challenges are being staggering. The antimatter is representing our best of the theoretical fuels. If it is not being sufficient, then the rockets as we are understanding them are simply not being able to be reaching the speed of light. The physics will not be allowing it. The ceiling of the energy density has been being reached. There is nothing that is being better, but the energy and the fuel are not being the only problems that are with the light speed travel. Something that is far stranger is happening to the reality itself as you are accelerating. Something that would be making the journey profoundly disturbing. At exactly the speed of light, the time is ceasing to be existing. And this is revealing why nothing with the mass can ever be reaching this ultimate velocity. Imagine a photon that has been being born inside of the core of the sundae. The nuclear fusion is creating it deep within the solar furnace. It is beginning a journey to the surface of the sundae. The core is incredibly dense. The photon is colliding with the atoms, and it is getting absorbed, and it is being re-emitted, and it is bouncing randomly. The journey to the surface is taking the thousands of the years from our own perspective. But from the perspective of the photon, no time is passing. It is being zero. The photon is being created, and it is being absorbed in the same instant. The entire journey is happening in precisely zero of the time. It is experiencing no duration whatsoever. This is what traveling at the speed of light is meaning. Your own clock is stopping, and it is not slowing, it is stopping completely. If you could be somehow accelerating to the speed of light, then the time would be freezing for you. The beginning and the end of your own journey would be being simultaneous. You would be arriving at your own destination in the same instant that you had been departing. The math is showing this brutally. The time dilation factor is being equal to 1 divided by the square root of 1 minus the velocity squared over the speed of light squared. At exactly the speed of light, you are dividing 1 by 0. The result is being undefined, and it is being infinite. The mathematics is breaking down. The concept of the duration is ceasing to be existing. Think about what this is meaning. You cannot be traveling at the speed of light because the experience is requiring the time. The thoughts are requiring the time. The perception is requiring the time. All of these would be stopping. You would not be experiencing an instant journey. You would not be experiencing anything. The experience itself would be impossible. Your own journey across the galaxy would be taking the thousands of the years from the perspective of the Earth. From your own perspective, it would be taking 0 of the time, and it is not being a small amount of the time, and it is not being a brief instant, it is being literally 0. The concepts of the before and the after would not be existing for you. This is being fundamentally different from the normal time dilation. At 99% of the speed of light, the time is running slowly, but it is still running. You are still experiencing the duration. The thoughts are still progressing. You are aging just slowly, but at exactly the speed of light, the progression of the time is halting completely. The photons are existing in an eternal frozen moment. Every single one of the photons that has ever been created is experiencing its entire existence as a single timeless instant. From the perspective of a photon, the universe is beginning and is ending simultaneously. It is witnessing all of the time that has being collapsed into a single point. This is physically impossible for anything with the mass. You cannot be existing without the time that is passing. Your own atoms are vibrating. The electrons are orbiting the nuclei. These are the processes that are requiring the time. Without the time, the matter cannot be functioning. The structure of the atoms is depending on the temporal progression. Your own neurons are firing at the specific rates. The electrical signals are propagating through the nerves at the finite speeds. The chemical reactions are proceeding through the intermediate states. All of this is requiring the time to be flowing. If you are freezing the time, then all of the biological function is stopping, and it is not being pausing, it is being stopping. The difference is crucial. The consciousness, especially, is requiring the time. The thinking is a process. The information is flowing through the neural networks. The patterns are evolving. The formation of the memory is depending on the before and the after. If you are freezing the time, then the consciousness is becoming impossible. You could not be being thinking. You could not be being aware. You would not be being experiencing the frozen moment. Even if you could be somehow being existing at the speed of light, then you could not be being slowing down. The deceleration is requiring the being experiencing of the time. You are firing the retro rockets. The fuel is burning. The thrust is building. The velocity is decreasing. Each of these is a temporal process. Without the time, the change cannot be occurring. You would be being locked at the speed of light forever, and you would be being experiencing nothing, and you would be being unchanging for the eternity. This is why the speed of light is being forbidden for the massive objects. And it is not just being because of the energy requirements, and it is not just being because of the fuel needs. It is being because the existence itself is requiring the time, and the time is stopping at the speed of light. The universe is protecting the causality by making the speed of light be being physically unreachable. If you are approaching 99.999%, then the time is nearly stopping. If you are approaching 99.9999%, then it is crawling at a millionth of the normal rate. But that last of the infinitesimal fractions, which is the gap that is between the almost speed of light and the exactly speed of light, is being infinitely wide in the terms of what must be changing. The Lorentz factor is approaching the infinity. The time dilation is approaching the infinity. The tick rate of your own clock is approaching the zero. But the zero itself is being unreachable. You can be getting arbitrarily close. You can never be arriving. The mathematics and the physics are both forbidding it. At the speed of light, the duration of any of the journeys is becoming undefined. The concept is breaking. You cannot be being meaningfully discussing how long something is taking when the time has been being stopped. The question itself is being nonsensical, and it is being like asking what is being north of the North Pole. But the time is not being the only thing that is breaking down. The space itself is warping in the equally bizarre ways. The space is shrinking in the direction of the motion, and at the extreme velocities the entire universe is appearing to be being compressed to the paper-thin dimensions. The special relativity of Einstein is predicting that something strange is happening to the distance itself. As you are accelerating, the lengths are contracting in your own direction of the motion. And it is not being doing so from your own perspective, but from the perspective of the stationary observers. To them, your own spacecraft is physically shrinking. At 10% of the speed of light, the contraction is being tiny. Your 10-meter spacecraft is appearing to be 9.95 of the meters long to the stationary observers, and it is being barely noticeable. At 50% of the speed of light, then, it is appearing to be 8.66 of the meters. Now it is being measurable. Your own ship has been being compressed by over a meter. At 90% of the speed of light, then the spacecraft is appearing to be 4.36 of the meters long, and it is being less than half of its rest length. The ship has not been being crushed. Nothing has been being deforming it. The space itself has been being contracting. From the view of the stationary observer, your own ship is being physically shorter in the direction of the motion. From your own perspective, which is inside of the spacecraft, nothing is seeming to be being wrong. You are measuring the interior dimensions, and everything is appearing to be being normal. It is being 10 of the meters from the front to the back. But when you are looking out of the window, then the universe is appearing to be being compressed. The stars that are ahead are being bunched together. The distances are shrinking. The space that is between the objects is decreasing. At 99% of the speed of light, then, your 10-meter ship is appearing to be 1.41 of the meters long to the stationary observers. It has been being compressed to 14% of its rest length. But from the inside, you are measuring 10 of the meters. The disagreement is real. Both of the measurements are being valid in their own respective reference frames. This is not being an optical illusion. This is not being a measurement error. The length contraction is as real as the time dilation is. The space is genuinely being compressing in the direction of the motion. The experiments with the particle beams are confirming this. The high-velocity particles are traversing the distances that their own lifetimes should not be allowing because the distances are contracting from their own reference frame. If you are being pushed to 99.9% of the speed of light, then your own ship is appearing to be 4.47 of the centimeters long. That is being less than 2 of the inches. A 10-meter spacecraft has been being compressed to the pocket-sized dimensions. From the inside, you are still being measuring 10 of the meters. The universe that is outside is appearing to be being squashed dramatically. The distances in front of you are shrinking to the tiny fractions. At 99.99% of the speed of light, then the objects in the direction of the motion are appearing to be being compressed by a factor of 70. A galaxy that is spanning 100,000 of the light years is appearing to be only 1,400 of the light years across. The entire structure is being pancaking flat in the direction of the travel. The equation for the Lorentz contraction is matching the equation for the time dilation. They are being 2 of the sides of the same phenomenon. As the time is slowing by a factor, the lengths are contracting by the same factor. The Lorentz factor is governing both. They are being intimately connected through the geometry of the space-time. This is how the muons are reaching the surface of the Earth. From our own perspective, the muons are living longer because of the time dilation. From the perspective of the muons, the distance to the ground is shrinking because of the length contraction. Both of the viewpoints are giving the same result. The muons are surviving the journey. The length contraction is having the bizarre implications. As you are approaching the speed of light, then the universe that is ahead is contracting more and more. At the extreme velocities, the billions of the light years of the space are being compressed to the manageable distances from your own perspective. You could be crossing the galaxy in the subjective time of the months or the years because the galaxy is appearing to be only thousands of the miles wide to you. But here is the catch. You are still being traveling for the billions of the light years from the perspective of the Earth. The billions of the years are passing on the Earth during your own journey. You have been being time traveling into the future by the enormous amounts. When you are returning, then everyone that you had been knowing is being long dead. The civilizations have been being rising and been being falling. The time dilation and the length contraction are 2 of the perspectives on the same relativistic effect. At exactly the speed of light, the lengths are contracting to the zero in the direction of the motion. The entire universe is compressing to an infinitely thin sheet that is being perpendicular to your own motion. The distance is ceasing to be existing. Every single one of the points in the entire universe is becoming equidistant. You would be being everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. This is another of the reasons why the speed of light is being forbidden. The distance is being fundamental to how the reality is working. The objects are being separated. The events are occurring at the different locations. If you are compressing all of the distance to the zero, then the spatial relationships are becoming meaningless. Where would you even be? The particle accelerators are observing the length contraction routinely. The protons that are traveling near the speed of light are experiencing the contracted distances. The 17-mile ring is appearing to be being shorter from their own reference frame. This shortening is exactly matching the time dilation that has been being observed in their own decay rates. The physics is being consistent. The math is working perfectly. The length contraction is not being about the objects that are being squeezed. It is being about the space itself that is having the different properties, and it is depending on the relative motion. The space is not being absolute. It is being observer-dependent. Just like the time is the unified space-time structure, is meaning that both of them must be varying together. But the time that is stopping and the space that is vanishing are not being the worst of the consequences of the light speed travel. Something that is far more dangerous is emerging, something that is threatening the logical consistency of the reality itself. If you are traveling faster than the light, then you could be theoretically killing your own grandfather before your own father was being born, and you would be destroying the logical foundation of the entire universe. The causality is the principle that the effects are following the causes. If you are flipping a switch, then the light is turning on. The cause is coming first and the effect is coming after. This is seeming to be obvious. This is seeming to be unbreakable. The special relativity is revealing that it is being intimately connected to the speed of the light. The information cannot be traveling faster than the light is. This is not just being a technical limitation, it is being fundamental to the causality itself. If the information could be traveling faster than the light, then the order of the events would be becoming observer-dependent. The different observers would be disagreeing on what had been happening first. Imagine a spaceship that was traveling faster than the light. From the perspective of the Earth, it is departing on the Monday and is arriving on the Tuesday. It is a simple cause and effect. But from certain of the other reference frames that were being moving relative to the Earth, the arrival is happening before the departure. The effect is preceding the cause. The ship is arriving on the Tuesday, and then it is leaving on the Monday. This is violating the causality. The effects cannot be preceding the causes. That would be meaning that the results are happening before their own causes are existing. It is being logically incoherent. The universe cannot be functioning in this way. The physics would be becoming contradictory. The special relativity is showing that the faster than light travel is being equivalent to the time travel into the past. If you could be sending a signal that was being faster than the light, then you could be arranging it so that the signal is arriving before you had been sending it. You would be receiving a message before you had been transmitting it. The information would be traveling backward in the time. If you are combining this with the relativity of the simultaneity, then the paradoxes are emerging. If you are sending a faster-than-light message to a moving spacecraft, then they are receiving it. If they are sending a faster-than-light reply, then under the certain conditions their reply is arriving before your own original message. You are receiving the response before you are sending the question. The grandfather paradox is the classic example. If you are traveling back in the time and you are killing your own grandfather before your own father was being born, then now your own father is never existing. Then you were never being born. But if you had never been being born, then you could not have been traveling back to be killing your own grandfather. Then he is surviving and your own father is being born and you are existing and you are traveling back. The loop is being logically impossible. The faster than light travel is creating the same problem. If you are traveling faster than the light to a distant star from the certain reference frames, then you are arriving before you had been leaving. If you are staying for a while and you are traveling back faster than the light, then you could be returning to the Earth before you had been departing. You could be meeting yourself, and you could be preventing yourself from being leaving. This is a paradox. The physics is appearing to be prohibiting the faster than light travel, and it is doing so specifically to be preserving the causality. The speed of the light is the maximum velocity at which the cause can be propagating to the effect. If you are exceeding this speed, then the temporal order of the events is breaking down. The universe is becoming logically inconsistent. Every single one of the experiments is confirming this boundary. The particle accelerators are pushing the particles to 99.99999% of the speed of the light, and they are never going faster. The quantum entanglement is creating the correlations that are being faster than the light, but it cannot be transmitting the information faster than the light. The cosmic speed limit is holding absolutely. Some of the physicists have been proposing the solutions. There are the wormholes that are connecting the distant points in the space-time. There are the Alcubierre drives that are warping the space around a spacecraft. These might be allowing the apparent faster-than-light travel without actually being moving through the space faster than the light is locally, but they are requiring the exotic matter and the negative energy and the things that may not be existing. Even if the exotic matter is existing, then these solutions are facing the problems with the causality. A wormhole could be becoming a time machine. If you are entering at one of the ends, then you could be exiting at the other end in your own past. This is creating the problems with the causality. The universe might be prohibiting this through the quantum effects. The chronology protection conjecture of Hawking is suggesting that the laws of physics are preventing the time travel by generating the destructive feedback. The intimate connection that is between the speed of the light and the causality is profound. The speed of the light is not just being a velocity, it is the rate at which the cause and the effect are propagating through the space-time. It is the speed of the causality itself. This is why nothing can be exceeding it. The logical structure of the reality is depending on this limit. Without the light speed limit, the physics is becoming inconsistent. The time ordering is depending on the reference frame. The different observers are disagreeing on the cause and the effect. The paradoxes are proliferating. The universe is becoming impossible to be describing mathematically. The relativity and the causality are together enforcing the cosmic speed limit. Every single one of the GPS satellites is proving this daily. Every single one of the particle accelerators is confirming it billions of the times. Every single one of the precision clock experiments is verifying it. The speed of the light is the guardian of the causality. If you are breaking this speed, then you are breaking the logic itself. But the GPS satellites are proving the relativity in another way. It is one that is so practical that the billions of the people are depending on it working correctly every single day. Your own phone is knowing your own location because the engineers are accounting for the predictions of Einstein, and without the relativity corrections, your own navigation would be failing within the minutes. 24 of the satellites are orbiting the Earth at a 12,430-mile altitude. Each of them is carrying the multiple atomic clocks that are being synchronized to within a few of the billionths of a second. These satellites are broadcasting the signals that are containing the precise timing information. Your own phone is receiving the signals from 4 or more of the satellites, and it is calculating your own position. The calculation is depending on the speed of the light being constant. The phone is measuring how long each of the signals had been taking to be arriving. If you are multiplying the travel time by the speed of the light, then you are getting the distance to each of the satellites. With the distances to 4 of the satellites, the phone is triangulating your own exact position. It is a simple geometry, but there is a problem. The satellites are moving at 8,750 of the miles per hour relative to the surface of the Earth. The special relativity is predicting that their clocks should be running slower than the ground clocks. This is the time dilation. At this velocity, the satellite clocks are losing about 7 of the microseconds per day. The satellites are also orbiting in the weaker gravity than the surface of the Earth is experiencing. The general relativity is predicting that the clocks are running faster in the weaker gravitational fields. This effect is adding about 45 of the microseconds per day. The net effect is that the satellite clocks are gaining about 38 of the microseconds per day compared to the ground clocks. 7 microseconds are lost from motion and 45 microseconds are gained from altitude. That makes a total gain of 38 microseconds. How much is this mattering? The light is traveling 1 of the feet per nanosecond. 38 of the microseconds is equal to 38,000 of the nanosecond. In 38 of the microseconds, the light is traveling 38,000 of the feet. That is being over 7 of the miles. If the satellite clocks are drifting by 38 of the microseconds, then the position calculations are being wrong by 7 of the miles. After one single day without the corrections, the GPS errors would be reaching 7 of the miles. After a week, it would be being 50 of the miles. After a month, it would be being over 200 of the miles. The system would be being completely unusable. Your own phone would be telling you that you are being in the next city when you are actually being at home. The GPS engineers had been facing this problem during the design of the system in the 1970s. Some of them had been arguing that the relativistic effects were being too small to be mattering. Others had been insisting that the corrections were being essential. The debate had been continuing. Finally, they had been deciding to be including the corrections. The solution is an elegant one. Before the satellites are being launched, their atomic clocks are being programmed to be ticking slightly slower than the ground clocks are. The rate is being adjusted by exactly the amount that the general relativity and the special relativity are predicting. When the satellites are reaching the orbit, then the relativistic effects are speeding their clocks up to the correct rate. The clocks are then staying synchronized with the ground time. Every single one of the GPS satellites that is in the orbit has been being adjusted for the relativity. If you were to be removing those adjustments, then the system would be failing. This has been being tested. The early satellites had been including the ability to be switching the relativistic corrections on and off. With the corrections being off, the positions had been drifting exactly as the equations of Einstein had been predicting. This is meaning that every single time that you are using the Google Maps, you are proving the relativity. Every single Uber ride, every GPS-guided aircraft, and every surveyor using precision positioning depend on these effects. Billions of position calculations each day confirm both special and general relativity. The corrections are not being approximate, they are being precise. The math is matching the equations of Einstein exactly. The slight changes to the correction factors would be causing the position to be drifting. The exact values that are being predicted by the relativity are being required. No other of the values are working. The other satellite navigation systems are confirming this independently. The GLONASS of Russia and the Galileo of Europe and the Beidou of China are all including the identical relativistic corrections. The different orbital altitudes are meaning the slightly different correction magnitudes, but the same physics is applying. Every single one of the systems is verifying the relativity. The International Space Station is experiencing the similar effects. At an altitude of 250 miles, orbiting at 17500 miles per hour, astronauts age about 7 microseconds less per day. That's compared to people on Earth. This is not being much, but it is being measurable with the atomic clocks. The effect is exactly matching the predictions of the special relativity. The commercial aircraft are also experiencing the measurable time dilation at the cruising altitude and the speed. The atomic clocks on the planes are gaining about 20 of the nanoseconds. This is not being enough to be affecting any of the practical applications, but it is being measurable, and it is matching the theory perfectly. The GPS is not being the abstract physics. It is not being a laboratory curiosity. It is the working technology that is being used by the billions of the people daily. The fact that it is working is proving that the relativity is being correct. The fact that the corrections must be being precise is proving that the equations of Einstein are being accurate. Your own smartphone is a relativity experiment. Every single position fix confirms that time dilation is real and that clocks run at different rates. It all depends on motion and gravity, proving that Einstein was right about the structure of space-time. Without the relativity, the modern navigation would be being impossible. We would be being back to being using the paper maps and the compasses. The GPS is demonstrating that the special relativity is not just being the theory, it is the practical physics that the technology is depending on. But the GPS is correcting for the small relativistic effects at the modest speeds. What if we could be somehow being bypassing the speed limit entirely? What if there were being the loopholes in the laws of the physics? Some of the physicists have been proposing the ways to be traveling faster than the light without technically being breaking the cosmic speed limit. But every single one of the solutions is requiring the being violating of the known physics in the different ways. The Alcubierre drive is the most famous of the proposals, and it had been being published in 1994 by the Mexican physicist Miguel Alcubierre. The idea is an elegant one. You are not being moving through the space. You are being moving the space itself. You are creating a bubble of the warped space-time around your own spacecraft. You are contracting the space in front of you. You are expanding the space behind you. You are surfing the wave of the warped space-time inside of the bubble. You are not being moving faster than the light is locally. The space itself is not being moving faster than the light is relative to you. But the bubble is carrying you across the vast distances faster than the light could be traversing them externally. You are sidestepping the speed limit by being warping the space-time geometry. The math is working within the general relativity. Alcubierre had been writing down the equations that were describing this space-time geometry. It is being consistent with the field equations of Einstein. On the paper, it is being possible, but there is a massive problem. The drive is requiring the exotic matter with the negative mass energy density. The negative mass is meaning the gravitationally repulsive matter. Instead of being attracting, it is pushing away. Nothing in the nature is having the negative mass. We have never been being observing it. We are not knowing if it can be existing. The standard model of the particle physics is not being including it. Creating the Alcubierre bubble would be requiring the amounts of the negative mass energy that were being comparable to the mass of Jupiter. Even if the negative mass is existing, then being collecting the Jupiter mass quantities is being impossible with any of the conceivable technology. And that is being just one of the problems. The bubble might be accumulating the particles at its own edge. When you are decelerating, then all of that accumulated energy could be releasing catastrophically. You would be incinerating everything at your own destination. The wormholes are another of the theoretical possibilities. They are the solutions to the equations of Einstein that are connecting the distant points in the space-time. If you are entering at one of the ends, then you are exiting instantly at the other end, and it is perhaps being thousands of the light years away. You are never being traveling faster than the light is locally, but you are traversing the vast distances quickly by taking a shortcut through the space-time itself. The general relativity is permitting the wormholes mathematically, but the stable, traversable wormholes are requiring the exotic matter to be holding them open. Without the negative mass energy, the wormholes are collapsing faster than the light can be crossing them. They are pinching shut before anything can be traveling through. Even if you had been having the exotic matter, then creating a wormhole might be impossible. You would be needing to be manipulating the space-time on the scales that are being far beyond the current technology. The quantum effects might be destroying any of the wormholes before they are becoming useful. The Hawking radiation could be making the traversal being lethal. Some of the wormholes could be becoming the time machines. If you are connecting two of the mouths of the wormholes and you are moving one at the high velocity, then the time dilation is making the moving mouth be aging slower. Now the two ends are existing at the different times. If you are entering at one, then you are exiting at the other in your own past. This is creating the problems with the causality. The universe might be preventing this through the quantum effects. The quantum entanglement is offering a different avenue. If you are entangling two of the particles and you are separating them by the vast distances, then if you are measuring one, then the state of the other is instantly changing. The correlation is happening faster than the light is, but you cannot be using this to be transmitting the information. The receiving end is seeing the random results until they are comparing the notes, which is requiring the normal slower than light communication. Some of the physicists had been proposing using the entanglement to be sending the signals. Every single one of the attempts is failing. The quantum mechanics is preventing the transmission of the information that is being faster than the light through the entanglement. The universe is seeming to be having a built-in protection against the violations of the causality. The tachyons are the hypothetical particles that are always being moving faster than the light is. If they are existing, then they would be having the imaginary mass. Their equations are requiring them to be speeding up when they are losing the energy. They would be experiencing the time backward. No experiment has ever been detecting the tachyons. Most of the physicists are thinking that they are not existing. Every single one of the proposed loopholes is requiring the violating of the known physics. There is the exotic matter that we have never been seeing. There is the negative energy that we are not knowing how to be creating. There are the quantum processes that might be impossible. There are the space-time geometries that may not be stable. None of these solutions are practical. Most of them are probably impossible. The universe is seeming to be determined to be enforcing the light speed limit. Every single one of the attempts to be finding a loophole is running into the problems, the physical impossibilities, the logical paradoxes, and the quantum barriers. It is as if the reality itself is actively preventing the faster-than-light travel. Perhaps the real barrier is not the engineering. Perhaps it is fundamental. The structure of the space-time might simply not be permitting the faster-than-light travel in any of the forms. All of the proposed loopholes might be the mathematical curiosities that cannot be manifesting in the reality. But even if the loopholes were to be existing, and even if we could be somehow exploiting them, then there is one more of the problems that is making the relativistic travel being terrifying. It is one that we have not been discussing yet. The only way around the barrier of the speed of light would require a substance that has never been observed and might not even exist. And if it did exist, it would violate nearly everything we understand about matter and energy. The exotic matter is sounding like the terminology of the science fiction, but it is a precise physics concept. It is the matter with the negative mass energy density, and it is not the antimatter which is having the positive mass. And it is not the dark matter, which is also having the positive mass. It is the truly negative mass that is generating the gravitational repulsion instead of the attraction. Every single one of the proposals to be bypassing the speed of the light is requiring the exotic matter. The Alcubierre drives are needing it to be warping the space-time. The wormholes are needing it to be staying open. Even some of the quantum-based schemes are requiring the negative energy states. Without the exotic matter, these loopholes are closing. With it, they might be barely opening. What would the negative mass be doing? It would be pushing instead of pulling. If you were to be placing the negative mass near the Earth, then it would be falling upward and it would be accelerating away from the planet. The Earth would also be accelerating toward it. The two of them would be chasing each other forever, and they would be accelerating continuously. This is violating the intuition completely. If you are pushing the negative mass, then it is accelerating in the opposite direction that you are pushing. The harder that you are pushing, the faster it is moving away from the force. This is seeming to be violating the laws of Newton. The force is equal to the mass times the acceleration. The negative mass is meaning that the force and the acceleration are pointing in the opposite directions. The conservation of the energy is becoming strange. The positive and the negative masses that were interacting could be generating the unlimited energy. The system is accelerating indefinitely. The total kinetic energy is growing without the bound. Where is this energy coming from? The equations are suggesting that it is appearing from the nowhere. Has anyone ever been observing the negative mass? No. Not once, and not even the hints. Every single one of the particles that we have been detecting is having the positive mass energy. The photons are having the zero rest mass, but they are having the positive energy. The neutrinos are having the tiny positive mass. Even the Higgs boson is having the positive mass. The universe is seeming to be exclusively producing the positive mass energy. The Casimir effect is creating something that is similar to the negative energy. If you are placing two of the metal plates that are extremely close together in the vacuum, then the quantum fluctuations that are between the plates are being restricted compared to the outside. This is creating a pressure difference. The plates are attracting. You could be interpreting this as the negative energy density that is between the plates, but the Casimir effect is minuscule. The force that is between the plates that are a few of the micrometers apart is being measured in the nanonewtons. To be powering an Alcubierre drive, you would be needing the negative energy density that was being trillions of the times stronger. We are not knowing how to be amplifying the effect. We are not even being knowing if the amplification is being possible. Some of the quantum field theory solutions are permitting the negative energy density temporarily, but the quantum inequalities are restricting how much of the negative energy can be existing and for how long. The more of the negative energy there is, the shorter of the duration it can be existing. The product of the magnitude and the duration is being bounded. This might be preventing the macroscopic exotic matter from being existing. Creating the large amounts of the exotic matter might be being fundamentally impossible. The quantum mechanics might be forbidding it. The attempts to be concentrating the negative energy could be triggering the vacuum decay or the other catastrophic processes. The universe might be having the built-in safeguards against the accumulation of the exotic matter. Even if the exotic matter is existing and we could be creating it, then being controlling it is seeming to be impossible. How are you being containing the matter that is being gravitationally repulsive? The ordinary containers are pushing it away. The magnetic fields are not being working on the uncharged exotic matter. You would be needing the exotic forces to be controlling the exotic matter. The storage would be being nightmarish. The exotic matter would be accelerating away from any of the containment. It might be being fundamentally uncontainable. The moment that you are creating it, it is escaping. Using it to be warping the space-time is requiring the precise placement and the control. If you cannot even be holding it in the place, then how can you be using it? The energy that is being required to be creating the exotic matter is being unknown, but it is probably being enormous. Warping the space-time significantly is requiring the tremendous energy density. Creating the Jupiter mass quantities of the exotic matter might be requiring more of the energy than is existing in the solar system. We are not just talking about the difficult. We are talking about the possibly beyond the total energy budget of any of the civilizations. The theoretical physics papers that are discussing the exotic matter are usually including the disclaimers. These solutions are being mathematically interesting, but they may not be corresponding to the physical reality. The equations are permitting the exotic matter, but the nature might not be. The mathematics is allowing many of the things that the physics is forbidding. Some of the physicists are arguing that the exotic matter is being impossible on the fundamental grounds. Others are thinking that it might be existing, but being inaccessible to the technology. A few of the optimists are suggesting that we have not been looking hard enough. But after the decades of the searching, we have been finding nothing. There has been no evidence, and there have been no hints, and there have been no experimental signatures. Without the exotic matter, all of the faster-than-light schemes are collapsing. The loopholes are closing. We are being back to the hard speed limit. The universe is enforcing its own cosmic speed limit, not just through the relativity, but by denying us the access to the only materials that might be bypassing it. But there is one more of the reasons why the relativistic travel is being dangerous, and it is beyond just the impossibility of reaching the speed of light. It is something that is making even the 90% of the speed of light being incredibly hazardous. At near the speed of light hitting, a speck of the dust is releasing the energy that is equivalent to the nuclear weapons, and the space is full of the dust. The space is seeming to be empty, and it is dark, and it is void. But it is not perfectly empty. There is the matter everywhere. There are the gas molecules, and there are the dust grains, and there are the micrometeorites, and there are the atoms of the hydrogen that are scattered throughout the interstellar space. There is about one of the atoms per cubic centimeter on the average. That is not being sounding like much, but it is being deadly at the relativistic speeds. A single proton is having a rest mass of about 1.7 times 10 to the power of minus 27 kilograms. This is essentially being nothing, but at 99% of the speed of light, that proton is carrying the kinetic energy that has been being amplified by the Lorentz factor of 7. Its impact energy is being 7 times larger than its rest mass energy. If you are calculating the numbers, then one of the protons at 99% of the speed of light is carrying about 10 million of the electron volts of the kinetic energy. That is being 10 million times more of the energetic than the same proton at rest. The cosmic rays are consisting of these high-energy particles. They are hitting the atmosphere of the Earth constantly. The individual protons are not being causing much of the damage, but a spacecraft that was being moving at 99% of the speed of light is encountering the quadrillions of them per second. Your own spacecraft is having the frontal area, and it is being maybe 10 of the square meters. As you are traveling one of the light years, then you are sweeping through a cylinder of the space that is being 10 of the meters in the area and 1 of the light years long. That cylinder is containing about 10 to the power of 17 of the atoms, which is 100 quadrillion of the atoms. Each of the atoms is hitting you with the energies that are being comparable to the cosmic rays, and they are being individually manageable, but they are being collectively devastating. The integrated dose of the radiation would be being enormous. The shielding would be having to be stopping the quadrillions of the high-energy particle impacts, but the atoms are being just the beginning. The dust grains are being worse. They are being much worse. A dust grain that is having a mass of 1 of the micrograms and it is being smaller than a grain of the sand is carrying the staggering energy at 99% of the speed of the light. If you are calculating the kinetic energy, then it is being half of the Lorentz factor times the mass times the speed of the light squared. The answer is being about 300 of the trillion of the joules. That is being 70 of the tons of the TNT. One single tiny dust grain that is being smaller than a pinhead is releasing the energy that is being equivalent to a small tactical nuclear weapon on the impact. The collision would be vaporizing the grain instantly. The expanding plasma would be blasting through the hull of your own spacecraft. The metal would be evaporating. The structure would be failing. The ship would be suffering the catastrophic damage from a single microscopic particle. The larger particles are being devastating beyond the description. A pebble that is having a mass of 1 of the grams at 99% of the speed of the light is carrying 300,000 of the trillion of the joules. That is being 70 of the megatons, and it is being larger than the biggest of the nuclear weapons that has ever been being detonated. One single pebble is destroying your entire spacecraft, and it is vaporizing it completely. Nothing is remaining. The odds of being hitting the larger particles are increasing with the distance that has been being traveled. The space is not being uniformly distributed. There are the denser regions, and there are the molecular clouds, and there is the debris from the stellar winds, and there is the interstellar dust that is being concentrated along the galactic plane. If you are navigating through these regions, then you are flying through a minefield. At 99.9% of the speed of the light, the kinetic energies are multiplying by another factor of 3. Now, a dust grain is releasing over 200 of the tons of the TNT equivalent. A pebble is yielding 200 of the megatons. The faster that you are going, the more of the catastrophic any of the collisions is becoming. Could you be shielding against this? The solid armor will not be working. The impact energy is vaporizing any of the material. The plasma jet is penetrating deeply. You would be needing the meters of the armor, and it would be making the spacecraft impossibly massive, and the armor itself is becoming a problem. The high-energy impacts are generating the secondary radiation that is flooding the interior. The magnetic shields might be deflecting the charged particles, but the dust grains are being electrically neutral. They are passing through the magnetic fields unaffected. You would be needing the fields that were being strong enough to be ionizing the approaching particles, and then be deflecting the ions. The power requirements are being enormous. The fields would be having to be extending far ahead of the ship. Some have been proposing the ablative shields, which are the layers of the material that are vaporizing on the impact, and they are absorbing the energy. But at the relativistic speeds, the ablation cannot be dissipating enough of the energy fast enough. The impact is happening faster than the material can be responding. The shock waves are propagating through the shield at the speed of the sound in the material. The impact is being traveling at 99% of the speed of the light. The shield cannot be reacting in the time. The active defense is seeming to be being impossible. You cannot be detecting and be avoiding the individual dust grains at near the speed of the light. They are being microscopic. The radar cannot be resolving them. By the time that you are detecting anything, you have already been hitting it. The light from an approaching particle is only reaching you the nanoseconds before the impact. There is no time to be maneuvering. Every single one of the collisions is generating the X-rays and the gamma rays. The high-energy photons are flooding your own spacecraft. The crew is receiving the lethal radiation doses. The electronics are failing. The materials are degrading. The ship is slowly disintegrating under the constant bombardment. Even if no single impact is being catastrophic, the natural cosmic rays are not being damaging us because they are being the individual particles. We are not being colliding with them at the relativistic speeds. They are being colliding with us. The relative motion is what is being mattering, but a spacecraft at the relativistic speed is effectively turning every single one of the particles in the space into a cosmic ray from the perspective of the spacecraft. Some calculations suggest that at 99.99% of the speed of light, flying through the interstellar medium would generate intense radiation. It would be equivalent to flying through the core of a nuclear reactor. The dose rate would be killing the humans in the minutes. The shielding that was being heavy enough to be protecting against this would be making the spacecraft too massive to be accelerating. This problem is having no obvious solution. It is not being the engineering, it is being the fundamental physics. The kinetic energy is scaling with the velocity squared in the classical limit, and it is growing even faster relativistically. Eventually, the collision energy is exceeding the ability of any of the materials to be withstanding the impact. Even the best of the proposed designs for the relativistic spacecraft are including the massive forward shields and the multiple layers and the sacrificial ablation and the magnetic deflection. But no design is convincingly solving the problem at the extreme relativistic speeds. The energy of the collisions is simply becoming too large. But maybe the future of the physics will be discovering the solutions. Maybe the new theories will be revealing the possibilities that we have not been imagining yet. Could the quantum gravity be rescuing the relativistic space travel? The relativity of Einstein is being incomplete, and the theory that is replacing it might be revealing the new possibilities, or it might be slamming the door on light speed travel even more firmly than the current physics is. The general relativity is describing the gravity beautifully, and it is doing so with the space-time curvature, the black holes, and the gravitational waves. Every single one of the predictions has been being confirmed. But the theory is having the limits. It is breaking down at the quantum scales. Inside of the black holes, and at the singularity of the Big Bang, where the gravity is becoming extremely strong and the quantum effects are mattering, the general relativity is failing. The quantum mechanics is describing the other three of the fundamental forces perfectly. The electromagnetism, the strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force are all being the quantum field theories. They are working at the smallest of the scales. But the gravity is resisting the quantization. Combining the general relativity with the quantum mechanics is producing the nonsensical infinities. The physicists have been searching for the quantum gravity for the decades. The string theory is one of the approaches. The loop quantum gravity is another. The dozens of the other proposals are existing. None of them are having the experimental confirmation. We are not knowing which, if any, is being correct. We are not even knowing if a unified theory is being possible. Why is this being mattering for the light speed travel? Because the quantum gravity is operating at the Planck scale. This is at the distances of 10 to the power of minus 35 of the meters, and at the times of 10 to the power of minus 44 of the seconds, the energies of 10 to the power of 19 of the giga-electron volts. At these scales, the spacetime itself might be being quantized, and it might be being discrete rather than being continuous. If the spacetime is being quantized, then the speed of the light might be emerging from the deeper principles. The speed limit might be being a consequence of the granular structure of the spacetime, or it might be being negotiable under the extreme conditions. We are not knowing. The quantum gravity could be changing everything, or it could be changing nothing. Some of the quantum gravity theories are suggesting that the spacetime is having the fundamental limits. You cannot be probing the distances that are being smaller than the Planck length. You cannot be measuring the times that are being shorter than the Planck time. These limits might be imposing the absolute constraints on the motion. The speed of the light might be being more fundamental than the relativity is suggesting. The other of the theories are proposing the extra dimensions. The string theory is requiring 10 of the dimensions. The M theory is requiring 11. Most of them are being curled up microscopically, but if we could be accessing them, then the physics might be working differently there. The speed of the light in the extra dimensions might be having the different values. Being traveling through the extra dimensions might be allowing the being bypassing of the normal speed limit, but this is being the pure speculation. No experimental evidence is supporting the extra dimensions. They are being the mathematical requirements of the certain theories. Whether they are physically being existing is being unknown, and whether we could be accessing them is being even more uncertain. Some of the physicists are suggesting that at the Planck energies, the space-time itself is becoming unstable. The quantum fluctuations are dominating. The virtual black holes are appearing and are disappearing. The smooth space-time of the general relativity is becoming a foaming quantum structure. In this regime, the normal concepts of the distance and the time might not be applying. Could this be offering a loophole for the faster-than-light travel? Maybe, but probably not. More likely, the quantum effects are just making the space-time more complicated. The speed limit is remaining. It might even be becoming more stringent. The quantum corrections could be strengthening the barriers rather than be weakening them. The Hawking radiation is showing one of the ways that the quantum effects are changing the predictions of the general relativity. The black holes are not being perfectly black. They are evaporating slowly through the quantum processes. Something that is similar might be affecting the other of the general relativity solutions. The wormholes might be being quantumly evaporating. The Alcubierre bubbles might be being quantumly decaying. The quantum gravity could be eliminating all of the proposed loopholes. We are being far from understanding the quantum gravity. The experiments at the Planck energies are being impossible with any of the conceivable technology. The Large Hadron Collider is reaching 10 to the power of 4 of the giga-electron volts. The Planck scale is being 10 to the power of 19. We would be needing the particle accelerators that were being larger than the galaxy. The direct testing is being beyond the reach. The indirect evidence might be coming from the astrophysics. There are the gravitational wave observations, and there are the black hole shadows, and there is the cosmic ray behavior at the extreme energies. These observations might be revealing the effects of the quantum gravity, but so far the general relativity is matching all of the observations. If the quantum corrections are existing, then they are being too small to be detecting currently. The ultimate theory of the physics might be revealing the possibilities that we have not been imagining. There might be the new symmetries, and there might be the new dimensions, and there might be the new fields. These could be permitting the forms of the travel that are seeming to be being impossible today. But they might also be confirming that the speed limit is being absolutely fundamental, and that it is being a part of the deepest structure of the reality. The history is showing that the new physics is sometimes opening the possibilities that the old physics had been forbidding. The special relativity itself had been revealing the time dilation and the length contraction that are enabling the subjective travel across the vast distances. Maybe the quantum gravity will be revealing something that is similar. a new dimension to the space-time, a new freedom that we have not been recognizing. Or maybe not. Maybe the universe is genuinely forbidding the faster-than-light travel at every single one of the levels. The classical mechanics had been saying no. The special relativity had been saying no, and it had been doing so more firmly. The general relativity is offering the tempting loopholes that are seeming to be requiring the exotic matter that we cannot be creating. The quantum gravity might be saying no, and it might be doing so most firmly of all. The final answer is awaiting a complete theory of the quantum gravity. Until then, we are working with the physics that we are having. And the physics that we are having is saying no. The speed of the light is the ultimate limit. Nothing with the mass can be reaching it. Nothing can be exceeding it. The universe is enforcing this rule through the multiple mechanisms. There are the energy requirements, and there is the growth of the momentum, and there is the stopping of the time, and there is the vanishing of the length, and there is the protection of the causality. Every single one of the experiments is confirming the barrier. There is every single one of the GPS satellites, and there is every single one of the particle accelerators, and there is every single one of the cosmic ray detectors, and there is every single one of the atomic clocks. The evidence is overwhelming. The speed of the light is standing as the ultimate boundary that is between what is being possible and what is forever being remaining beyond the reach. We have been exploring every single one of the angles. There is the mathematics, and there are the experiments, and there are the technological challenges, and there is the fundamental physics. All of the roads are leading to the same conclusion. The light speed travel for the massive objects is being impossible. It is not being difficult, and it is not being expensive, it is being impossible. The universe is saying so,